Inside the Whitford estate, there was a dog no one dared to approach. At the far end of the courtyard, behind thick steel bars and a heavy padlocked gate, a massive German shepherd paced with unrelenting energy. His paws thudded against the cracked concrete, claws dragging like knives. His deep growls echoed across the stone walls, vibrating low and dangerous through the warm summer air. The servants whispered his name with dread. Max. To the staff who stayed behind those who hadn't. Quit in fear or injury, he wasn't a pet. He was a threat, a storm coiled in black fur. 2 handlers had already left the estate in ambulances, their arms shredded, their faces pale with shock and pain. One never returned. The other never spoke of Max again, yet Max remained. Richard Whitford, patriarch of the estate and empire alike, had poured a small fortune into acquiring Max. He wasn't just a security measure, he was a statement, an apex protector, a symbol of dominance. To Richard, putting Max down would be an admission of failure, a crack in the flawless empire he'd built brick by brick. It would mean even his wealth and control couldn't tame this animal. And that, for a man like Richard Whitford, was unacceptable. 12-year-old. Maya Grant had only seen Max in brief, cautious glimpses. Her mother, Margaret, worked as a cleaner on the estate, and Maya often trailed behind with a bucket in one hand and a mop in the other, wiping floors that gleamed like glass. She kept her head down, her voice soft, her steps quiet. But sometimes her eyes would wander, and they always landed on Max. Most of the staff averted their gaze when passing his enclosure, but Maya looked. She watched him with a quiet, searching curiosity. Where others saw madness, she saw something else, something that made her chest tighten. In Max's heavy gaze, behind those amber eyes, was something broken, something scared. She couldn't name it, but she knew it. It lived inside her too. The Whitford estate was a world split down the middle. On one side, marble columns, linen tablecloths, laughter behind stained glass windows. On the other, the cramped cottage behind the hedges where Maya and her mother lived. It smelled of mildew and boiled cabbage, but it was all they had. And behind those steel bars, Maya found something familiar, something that mirrored her own. Isolation. Her glances were small, fleeting, and she never dared get too close. But she watched Max with a kind of reverence. Most of the time, no one noticed, but someone did. Tyler Whitford, the 15-year-old son of Richard, heir to the estate and king of cruelty, had seen her. And he had plans. He was tall for his age, sharp-jawed, and always dressed in clean white polo shirts, his hair pushed back like he was already a man. But his eyes carried a cold, playful venom. Tyler loved finding weakness, especially in those below him. And to him, Maya's quiet staring wasn't empathy, it was softness. And softness begged to be tested. So, on a blistering afternoon thick, with dust and the faint smell of chlorine, Maya found herself cornered. She had just finished scrubbing the steps when Tyler's voice floated across the courtyard like a taunt. "Hey, maid girl." She froze. He was standing with 3 of his friend's boys in expensive sneakers and smug grins. One of them held a phone, already recording. They formed a lazy half circle near the edge of Max's pen. Maya's stomach turned. "Let's see if the cleaning girls got more guts than the dog trainers," Tyler said, his voice soaked in mockery. Maya clutched the handle of her bucket, her heart pounding so hard it made her ears ring. "I don't want to," she tried to say, but the words stuck like stones in her throat. Too late. With a loud clang, Tyler shoved the gate open. A single forceful hand landed on her shoulder. A hard shove. She stumbled forward, bucket slipping from her fingers, water sloshing as it hit. The dirt. She hit the ground hard. The air knocked from her lungs. Her palms scraped raw against the earth. Around her, she heard laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing. The sound blurred as her ears roared with panic. Then silence. She looked up and froze. There, just feet away, rose Max, a shadow made of flesh and sinew, his massive head lifted. His amber eyes locked onto hers. The growl in his throat was low, but it wasn't angry. It was wary, uncertain. Like a beast standing on the edge of a memory. Maya couldn't breathe. Her limbs felt locked, her body frozen in time. The others had gone quiet behind her. Even Tyler's arrogant smirk faltered. Max took one step. The dirt crunched beneath his paw, but he didn't lunge. He didn't snarl. He didn't move closer. Instead, his breath slowed. His muscles loosened slightly. He stood tall and still, like a sentry waiting for orders. Those amber eyes never left hers. And for a reason Maya couldn't understand, she didn't want them to. There was something there. Not rage, not hunger. Something deeper, something cracked. She felt it in her chest, a tremor that had nothing to do with fear. It was as if a single, invisible thread had stretched out between them, fragile, trembling, but real. In that quiet space between heartbeats, Maya saw not a monster, but a soul not so different from hers. Then came the voice. What the hell is going on here? It cracked through the silence like a whip. The teenagers parted instantly, scattering, like leaves in wind. Through the gap, Richard Whitford emerged, his expression sharp as glass. His gaze landed on Maya, then on Max, then back again. His face darkened. I've seen enough, he said, voice colder than stone. That animal is finished. No. The word ripped out of Maya before she could stop it. Her voice trembled but was louder than she had ever heard it. She stumbled to her feet, dirt clinging to her knees, and stepped in front of Max. The silence was suffocating. Richard's eyes burned with quiet fury. I warned everyone. That animal is a risk I will not take again. No one moved. Even Tyler looked uneasy now. His friends lowered their phones. Behind her, Max made a soft, almost unsure sound. Please, Maya whispered, barely above a breath. Don't kill him. Gasps rippled through the circle. The maid's daughter, speaking, defying. Richard narrowed his eyes. You think because he didn't rip your throat out, that he's safe? That dog is a loaded gun waiting to go off. Maya's lip trembled. Her voice cracked but didn't break. I think, she said, each word slow and fragile. I think he's scared. Just like me. Richard exhaled, not anger, but a wary resignation. He hadn't wanted to destroy Max, but watching his son turn fear into a game had lit a darker truth. If the animal couldn't be controlled, someone would eventually pay the price. 3 days, Richard said. At last, his tone low and final. Prove me wrong, girl, or he's gone. Behind her, Maya heard Max's breath steady, as if the dog somehow understood what she had just done. The morning after felt heavier than the night before. The Whitford estate loomed over Maya as she made her way across the courtyard. Each step a reminder of the promise she had made. 3 days. 3 days to prove that Max wasn't the monster everyone believed he was. 3 days to save him from a fate she couldn't bear to imagine. The enclosure was silent except for the sound of slow, deliberate breathing. Max stood near Thebek, a shadow against the gray light of dawn, his amber eyes following her every move. The steel latch of the gate was cold under her fingers, and for a moment she couldn't bring herself to open it. Her chest rose and fell too fast. What am I doing? The question screamed inside her head. She wasn't a trainer. She wasn't even supposed to be here. She was just a girl with shaking hands and a voice that barely worked around strangers, let alone a dog who had sent men twice her size to the hospital. But when her gaze met his through the fence, that same quiet etch stirred in his eyes, and her fear bent into something else. Resolve. Maya drew in a shaky breath and unlatched the gate. The metallic clang echoed like a gunshot. Max's head lifted higher, his muscles tensing, but he didn't move forward. "Aye," Maya whispered, her voice almost breaking. Then she lowered herself to the ground, crossing her legs in the dirt, keeping her hands in her lap. She didn't reach for him. She didn't speak again. Minutes bled together in fragile silence until Philo rumble in Max's chest softened. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was a beginning. By the second day, the fear had dulled into something quieter, but no less heavy. Maya sat cross-legged in the dirt, the morning air cool against her skin as Max watched her from a cautious distance. He no longer growled when she entered. That was something. She'd brought a small piece of bread from the kitchen, holding it out on hairpin palm. Her hand trembled, but she kept it steady, her breath shallow as Max's nose lifted to catch the scent. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then, with a slow, deliberate step, Max closed the gap and took the bread gently from her hand. The touch of his teeth against her skin was barely there, but it made Maya's chest tighten. "Not with fear, with hope. You're not a monster," she whispered. "You talk to him like he understands you." The voice startled her. She spun around to see Walter, the state's weathered groundskeeper, standing just outside the fence. High size, faded, but sharp, lingered on Fedig. "Sorry," Maya stammered, tucking her hands into her lap. "I didn't mean to," Walter shook his head. "Don't apologize. Most folks only see what they're afraid of. You're seeing him." He stepped closer to the fence, his voice dropping lower. "That dog's been trained before, not for homes, for something harder. He's carrying more than teeth and muscle in that body." Maya looked back at Max, who had settled into the dirt near her, still wary, but no longer retreating. "I didn't care what he was trained for," she said softly. "I just want him to know safe now." Walter's gaze softened. "Then keep showing him. Trust isn't built in a day, kid. But you've got his attention. That's where it starts." By third morning, Maya's fear had shifted into something heavier. Responsibility. The air inside the enclosure felt different now. Less like a cage and more like a confession waiting to happen. Max spaced at first, the same restless steps that had made grown men flinch. But when Maya lowered herself to the ground, Hepaust, his amber eyes catching hers through the veil of early light, she didn't reach for him. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she simply sat there, letting the silence stretch between them until her own heartbeat slowed. The silence stretched long enough for Maya to hear her own heartbeat steady. It wasn't just fear in his eyes. This was something deeper, rawer, a kind of quiet desperation that spoke without words. "Don't come closer unless you mean to stay." "Baz!" Chest dashed. It wasn't anger that had built those walls around him. It was the memory of being left behind, of giving his trust to someone once and paying for it with pain. Her throat tightened. "You're not trying to hurt people," she murmured. "You're trying to keep them from hurting you." Max's ears flicked a sound of her voice, his body lowering a fraction, the tension in his holders easing ever so slightly. Maya swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. She knew that feeling, the ache of bracing yourself every day, waiting for the world to remind you you didn't belong. In that quiet space, something shifted. Not a trick, not a command, just two wounded souls recognizing the same fracture in each other. When Max finally settled in the dirt a few feet from her, the breath Maya let out trembled. But it carried Asmal. Fragile hope? It wasn't victory, it wasn't trust. But it was the first thread of a bond neither of them had ever known they needed. By the time Feathered Day ended, the courtyard felt like a courtroom. The air was heavy with second of silence that comes before a verdict. Maya stood outside the pen, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt as Dr. Harmon stepped inside with calm measured steps. Max's body was a storm contained. He paced, ears flat, every muscle wound tight. When Dr. Harmon moved closer, a low, guttural growl rolled out of his chest, not wild, but measured, controlled by something deeper than instinct. Dr. Harmon's voice stayed steady, professional, each word weighed with experience. He's alert, highly intelligent, but every response he gives is born out of fear, not trust. A dog that survives this way isn't living. He's bracing, and that kind of fear, it can't walk safely into the world outside these walls. Maya's stomach nodded. The words blurred in her ears, but the tone was clear. Max had failed. Richard's voice cut through thick, quiet, low, and final. End it. We can't risk him any longer. The weight of Richard's words didn't just land in fear. It sank straight into her chest like a stone dropped into deep water. Something inside Maya cracked, sharp and sudden, as if the ground beneath her feet had split open. Her legs fell fallow. She wanted to move, to scream, to throw herself between Max and the man-wo had just sealed his fate. But her body wouldn't listen. Her breath caught in her throat, turning the world into a blur, edged with panic. Max had stopped pacing. The silence that followed was worse than the growl. He stood perfectly still now, the tension in his body drawn tight as wire. Slowly, those amber eyes turned. Not just to Richard, but to her. It wasn't a wild look. It wasn't even defiance. It was something far worse. He understood. In that moment, Maya swore she could feel his fear bleeding into her own. A wordless question trembling between them. Will you leave me too? Her chest constricted until it hurt. The sting behind her eyes burned, but she couldn't link. Every muscle in her small frame shook with the weight of the answer she hadn't spoken yet. Maya pressed a trembling hand against the cold metal off gate. Her breath hitched, the words clawing their way past the lump in her throat. Raw and desperate. Max sit. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a plea. It was the sound of a breaking heart reaching for something it refused to lose. For one long, suffocating second, the world froze. The wind stilled. Even the air seemed to wait. And then Max moved, not with the sharp mechanical obedience of a trained dog, but with a slowness that felt almost reverent. His muscles uncoiled one by one as if every motion carried the weight of a choice. When his body lowered into the dirt, it wasn't submission. It was trust bang-handed, trembling into her small, shaking hands. His amber eyes never left hers. The growl that had lived in his chest for so long faded into nothing, replaced by a stillness so deep it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. A sound slipped from Maya's chest, half sob, half laugh, breaking under the force of relief. Good boy. Stay. Max stayed perfectly still, perfectly hers. In that moment, Dr. Harmon's pen hovered mid-air, forgotten. His mouth opened, then closed again as if his training had no words for what had just witnessed. When he finally spoke, his voice was no louder than a whisper. That's not training. That's not obedience. That's love. Maya wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her voice cracking as she whispered. He just needed someone who wouldn't walk away. The courtyard held its breath long after the command left her lips. For a moment, Maya couldn't tell if the world was moving at all. Then, with her heart trembling in her chest, she stepped forward. Max didn't growl. He didn't back away. He simply watched her, his amber eyes softer now, as if waiting to see which would choose. Maya dropped to her knees in the dirt, her hands shaking as she reached out. She half expected the snap of teeth, the tense ripple off muscle, but none came. Instead, Max leaned in, his great head pressed against her small shoulder, heavy and warm, like he had been carrying fate gesture inside him, waiting for the right person to receive it. A broken sound left her throat. Half sob, half relief. Her fingers sank into his thick fur, and he let her. No walls, no fear, only the quiet surrender of a creature who had finally found someone to hold on to. Then, in the softest motion, his tail brushed the ground. A hesitant wag got the first hint of joy shaking off the years of fear. Maya buried her face into his neck, the smell of earth and dog and life filling her lungs. He wasn't a monster. He never had been. He was just waiting, desperate and patient for Somion to tell him he belonged. And in that moment, with his weight leaning against her like home, Maya knew he had chosen her. Not as a trainer, not as a savior, as family. Richard hadn't moved. For a man who lived his life behind decisions carved in stone, his eyes now carried something softer, something Evan he couldn't name. He looked at the girl still kneeling in the dirt and the dog, who had once been nothing but a weapon locked in a cage. Dr. Harmon let out a slow breath and closed his case with acre that felt almost reverent. His voice was low, not clinical now, Booth-humbled. I've seen recovery. I've seen training change behavior. But this his gaze lingered on Max, resting his head against Ma's small frame. This isn't training. This is trust built from the ground up. It's rewriting who he is. Maya buried her face in Max's fur. The steady warmth of him wrapping around her like an answer she'd been searching for her whole life. The storm inside her, the fear, the smallness, finaliquated. Richard's voice broke the silence rougher than usual, as if it had to push through his chest to come out. He stays, he said simply. Then after a beat with you? Maya's head snapped up, tears spilling as disbelief and hope crashed together. With me? Richard nodded once. You're the only one who reached him when no one else could. That makes you the only one who should keep treeing. I'll make sure you both get the training you need. The words hadn't fully sunk in when Max shifted, leaning his full weight into her as if sealing the promise himself. Maya smiled through the blur in her eyes. It was never just about saving a dog. Somewhere in this fight, Max had saved her too, by proving she was worth holding on to. And this time, neither of them would ever let